thrilled that you've chosen to join us here for this session this afternoon on giving in China and India, 2.5 billion reasons to do better. The session's goal is really for you to hear advice from on-the-ground experts. We can't thank our speakers enough for being here today, joining us at our CECP Summit. Please, continue to get the snacks and then return to the tables. We'll do a little bit of small table discussion as part of our session. What inspired this session really is something that Michael referenced in his comments, which is a new report CECP released last year called Giving Around the Globe. You've got some copies here. It covers two new topics for CECP, which is how are companies from different regions different in how they give, and also what can we find out about international giving at the country level. So this is a new area for us, and you'll see why we were inspired to have this session based on what we found in this research. I'm just giving a quick sample and taste to talk about what we were inspired from this research to provide this session here at our summit. One thing is that, not completely surprisingly, companies from different regions are different in how they execute their strategies. So you can see a common breakdown for CECP is what comes from corporate cash, what comes from foundations, and what comes from in-kind or non-cash. North American companies stand out incredibly in their proportion of non-cash giving. We use numbers to interpret into strategies. So what might this tell you in international giving strategy? Partners abroad may not be expecting the level of non-cash and in-kind contributions that is typically part of your relationships and strategy. So it's taking these numbers and converting them into how you might think about entering new markets. Where does corporate giving flow? These are the top 10 countries from 2012, and you will quickly see one of the inspirations for our session here is that India and China, with Canada kind of plunked right in the middle there, are the two countries where the highest percentage of companies are giving in 2012. It's probably not a surprise to all those of you in the room as you're interested in these markets, but again, this is translating into strategy. Beyond our leaders in India and China, this may indicate markets that you want to look into. It also talks about how international giving follows business strategy, which is where's the international revenue, where are international employees, and how does giving lay against that. So that was kind of the inspiration from our research on why we wanted to have this session here today. And obviously, China and India are not just in international giving news. If you saw the Forbes Global 2000 recent release, China is right next to the US, all throughout the top 10. India in the news constantly about this new 2% CSR law. Obviously with the recent elections, there's possible changes to that as well. So we're so thrilled to have both of our panelists here to discuss all of this with us. The session is going to go with some introductions of our panelists and their organizations. They'll have a chance to make some opening comments. We want to hear from you all what questions you'd like answered from our panelists here today. I've got some questions for them, and then we'll open it up to the room. The way we'd like to open it up to the room is a quick discussion among your table to pick one question from the table to present to our panelists. We'll be rushing only slightly because of our time schedule, so we're hoping we can finish around 4:15 to move on to the breakout sessions, and then of course, the very important reception which follows. So to make a brief introduction of both, I'd like to first introduce Deval Sanghavi, who is here from Dasra. He's the partner and co-founder of the organization along with Neera Nundi. Both worked at Morgan Stanley over 10 years ago, and Morgan Stanley is here. I don't know if Joan Steinberg is in the room, but alumni here that started Dasra. And Deval specifically initiated the Dasra Philanthropy Week as well as their giving circles, which are a really important part of their model. Ms. Wang Ping joins us from the China Social Entrepreneur Foundation. She's the founder and the chairperson of the board and the secretary general of the organization, which is also known as UChange. Her network is extremely wide and deep. I was quite impressed reading her biography to see how many different sectors she has touched in her history, as well as international experience. So really well suited to talk to us about the market in China with an understanding from her experiences working in the US and other places. She founded the China Social Entrepreneur Foundation in 2007. So the way I'd like to introduce your organizations, if the panelists are open to it, is to tell a little bit about what I understand from your organizations, and then hear, am I hitting the right points, and how would you kind of respond to my introduction of your organizations? So Deval, when I think of Dasra, there's two phrases that sort of stick out for me, and one is strategic philanthropy, and one is empowering adolescent girls. And when I first learned of DASRA, I thought, oh, perfect. This organization puts themselves forward, finds the most strategic nonprofits, and funnels funds to them. This is exactly what I hear companies asking us. How can we find high-impact nonprofits in new markets? As I learned more, I realized that there's that, and there's even more. There's advocacy and social change, training for civil sector leaders, and a whole new foray into CSR. If I had to pick one number for DASRA, it would be 500, which is the number of successful nonprofits that have been cultivated through your work. So that would be kind of my summary, and I'd love to hear, Dave, how I did.
Great. No, I think you did an excellent job. DASRA was formed 15 years ago with the goal of creating impact at scale. I think what many of you guys in this room realize that there were some phenomenal social organizations that existed, but many times they lacked the professional skills to really take their organizations to the next level. So we do quite a bit of work in terms of identifying these high-impact organizations, and I think more importantly, post that is providing them with growth funding through collaboration with corporates, foundations, and high-net-worth individuals, and then providing those organizations with professional and managerial skills, enabling them to really take their model to the next level. I think it was great to see the awards earlier today, and again, see the corporate and NGO partnerships that you guys highlighted, and how this is just a great opportunity, I hope, with the CSR law that's been passed in India, for corporates to again work alongside existing organizations and enabling them to create greater impact.
Okay, great. And so, Ms. Wang, when I learned about the China Social Entrepreneur Foundation, my two terms for that would be neo-philanthropy and platform. Because as I read your materials, those were two themes that came through very strongly in how you talk about your work. It's a quite prestigious organization and very strong, and with their roots in China and the development that you have of the sector. I have to say also, when I first began to learn, I thought of it paralleling an American community foundation. But I realized that something that our panelists have in common is that part of their mission is really about cultivating the NGO sector in their markets. It's something you share, probably done some ways similarly and some ways differently, but I think that that's an interesting parallel to draw. A focus on poverty alleviation and social change. And my number for China Social Entrepreneur Foundation would be 11 platform projects in how you organize your work around different platforms. So if you could, please let me know, how does that summarize China Social Entrepreneur Foundation, and did I miss any important points you'd like to share? I have a few of your organization slides here if you want to make a few comments, and then we'll go to your opening statement shortly after. So please.
I will do it. So it's a great pleasure to join you in the significant summit. And I'm very happy to see that most of you during the survey, most of you choose to have a cooperation with the nonprofit organization. So I hope when you go to China to cooperate, to choose the cooperator and choose the China Social Entrepreneur Foundation as your partner. So why? Let me tell you, the name of Social Entrepreneur Foundation means that I believe that to solve the social problem, we need entrepreneurship. So we need to use the entrepreneurship to solve social problem. That's why we call our foundation a Social Entrepreneur Foundation. And the short name you changed coincidentally. It's the similar pronunciation like Chinese Youcheng, our name of foundation. So we use You Change as our short name, and it means we are change maker. So we are an independent private foundation to improve the social innovation and to as a platform. Okay, that's the first stages we have done since 2007. At the beginning, we are the first to introduce social innovation and social enterprise to China. And that's 7 years ago. And 4 years ago, we initiated 7 trends of new philanthropy under the new social, economic, and the technological condition. And then last year, we initiate a new philanthropy concept to invest area to become we advocate social impact investing. And this year, we developed the social innovation standards for that's 3A I will introduce. So in order to, so that's what we have done during the 7 years, supporting 148 fledgling nonprofit and R&D and pilot programs like this. So that's, we are advocating social innovation in investing field. We get the support from Blair. That's the,
Okay, so here's the, so this is the introduction for the organization. So you can make your opening comments following this now.
Okay.
So this is just the organizational introduction. So hopefully you have a good understanding of DASRA, of China Social Entrepreneur Foundation. I want to take a quick test with the audience. I'd like to know by show of hands, how many of you consider your companies new to giving in China? So new could be 1 or 2 years, you're exploring new strategies, you haven't been there many years, or you haven't given yet, but you know it's coming. So new to giving in China. A small handful, so split 50-50. And how many would put yourselves in the new category for giving in India? Maybe 1 or 2 years, a little bit of activity, but not a lot. Okay, even less. So maybe more activity in India, a little bit less in China. I think that's good for us to understand that the majority of the room has some activity there, some quite experienced likely. I'd also like to know from the audience, I'm just going to take 2 or 3 if people can say, what were some things you were really hoping to learn from this session? That we can put those out right in front before the speakers are giving their opening comments. So anybody can put out just 2 or 3 right here. Doug?
I think in China, the view of the government of the organizations that we're coming in and working with is that welcome and accepting, if there are certain parameters that the government's going to look for so that we don't actually step on toes on the public sector side while forming a partnership with an NGO.
Okay, others that are interested in government role in China, just show of hands. Some hands, okay. I'll take 2 more.
I would like to hear a little bit more about how folks are complying with the new India CSR law, whether they're giving from the parent or directly from their organization in India.
So an element of how people are carrying out any new strategies related to the law, specifically whether they're giving from headquarters or actually giving locally. And 1 more. Any other burning questions right here?
Yeah, just we saw in the United States the value of donated product and non-cash. I just wonder how well that kind of was received.
So non-cash giving in both markets?
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is really good to do sort of at the beginning so we can get a sense of what's on your minds. And our panelists can focus their comments where possible to some of the questions that you have, although we'll do a longer Q&A towards the end. So we'd like now to give you both some opportunity to make some opening comments in general about, probably in your case, Dave, the law, the impact you think you have on helping companies apply it, also what has changed in the NGO sector, but just some sort of general comments and advice you can give to the audience related to the topic.
Great. So as you guys know, from April 1st of this year, a law was enacted mandating that all companies that have profits of over $833,000 a year or 50 million rupees are mandated now by law to give 2% of their net profits to charitable activities. Similar to the US and India, we have organizations that are registered under different laws, but they sort of mimic the 501c3 that focus on alleviation of poverty or women's rights or malnutrition and other social issues that come under this law. So organizations or companies, I guess, could fund existing entities. They can create something on their own, which sort of comply by sort of the 7 to 8 areas that the government has mandated as being allowed. And the government also has said that companies could give to the Prime Minister's Fund, which then supports different activities, which we have very little clue on actually what happens post that. But that option is there. I think the change that this has really created is, we have had companies and many industry leaders, such as the Tatas, for example, who've been giving towards charity for over 100 years. And they've been giving much larger than 2%. In fact, over 70 to 80% of their entire company holdings actually lie in trusts. So you have sort of companies that are large family foundations who've been doing this from day one. Yet really the goal, I think, of the law was to have other companies to start abiding by this. And I think in doing so, we're seeing shifts where for many companies, I guess, CSR was more of an afterthought, something that honestly 7 or 8 individuals are complied to or sort of put on a committee. They meet every 3 months and they make these decisions. I think after this law, because the quantum of funds is so much greater, you're actually now having senior decision makers participating in these conversations. And we're hoping then it's more aligned to the business interests. So like we saw with Direct Relief earlier today and FedEx, ideally looking at the core competencies of the business and the shared value proposition, and then sort of moving forward with these type of activities. That being said, the Indian government, as of now at least, the laws are fairly strict, so you cannot have a business value proposition in implementing this law. So it has to be very different than acquiring clients for your business. That being said, you can leverage your core competencies like we've seen other companies in the US and in other places do. I think in India, these laws, once they're passed, it takes actually a couple of years for them to be implemented. We see multinational corporations and family businesses in India that have a strong standing and brand reputation, probably being the first to abide by these laws, because we just are assuming that the media, after sort of it's time to report, which is about a year from now, the media will probably go after these companies first because their records can potentially be tarnished if they don't abide by these laws. And over time, you'll see sort of the small and medium enterprises sort of following suit.
Terrific. So actually, if I can ask you a follow-up right away, you mentioned that you think that the multinationals will be some of the first to abide by the law. Can you talk a little bit more about why you think that is and how that might change the interpretation of the law and the implementation sort of for years to come?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess what people many times don't realize, even in India, is that in terms of our tax basis, 3% of our population earn enough money in India to actually pay income tax. And 700 million individuals earn less than $5 a day. And if anyone has taken an economics class, clearly there is a role for private philanthropy to play an active sort of participation in sort of uplifting individuals out of poverty. I think with that in mind, again, the large family businesses or the multinationals, I think, understand that it is in their best interest to uplift the communities that they serve and profit from. Where I think a lot of the small and medium enterprises may not necessarily go down this path because shareholders are not necessarily looking at their books. And so the law actually states that in your annual report, you have to declare whether or not you've given the 2%, and if not, you actually have to give reasons of why you did not give that 2%. There is no penalty for not giving the 2%, but there's a penalty for not actually talking about this on your annual report and on your website. So again, those companies that have strong brand reputations are the ones who are going to ensure that they follow by these laws. Whereas, like I said, many small and medium enterprises who are not necessarily affected by an annual report, especially if they're not even public, probably they're not going to be as phased, and they will just say in their annual report that we didn't abide by it because this was not the right time.
Yeah. I think it's quite an interesting point you raise. It's something that is a nuance of the law people talk more about now, which is that the transparency element, the reporting element, is what's the requirement. And the 2% is not, as you said, there's no penalty if it's not met. However, having the reporting requirement in place obviously allows the public. We heard a lot in more opening sessions about transparency and how that's ever increasing and the public is much more engaged. And so it seems that that would be sort of the way that it could be policed. So thank you for that opening comment. I'd like to ask Nader if you could flip to the second presentation for us. And Ms. Wang, if you could please now, we'll have your slides. And we'd love for you to make some opening comments on what you think the market in China, how it has changed, the most important places for companies to give. And we have a large deck. She's going to be kind of jumping through and selecting the most important slides to go through. So let's see if I can get you to where you need to go. Is this the other one? Yes, okay.
So, we focus on the social impact investing and or social philanthropy. But we need standards. So that's why we create these three A standards. That's one is the aim, that's motivation. And the second approach is innovation for effective philanthropy. The third A is action sustainability. That's what we create the criteria. Oh. So now regarding the field of China, so you can see widespread environmental pollution, aging society, and so on. So you can see, for the time saving, I will not read all of them. The social organization in China, by the end of 2012, so it's a significantly increased. The foundation, the numbers of foundations increased because a lot of private enterprise, they set up their own foundations. For the government highly restricted the foundation, but for the registered at the beginning, they are poorly managing, but now they become stimulate the vitality of social organization, so improve a lot as a social management. That's a new progress from China to opening up, but still they have a lot of inside restriction. The new trends in cooperation philanthropy, apart from massive donation, so some of the not only private enterprise in China, but also multinational companies began to set up their own foundations like BMW and Amway. And more and more pro bono service in China began. And we have cooperated with McKinsey and so on. They do a lot of pro bono service. And CSR integrate to business cooperation like Nike and Tom's. So that's the charitable donation in China. So you can see the same as what we said on the last session. It's education, almost the first, and second, the poverty alleviation. So what we said is that we advocate new philanthropy because we don't think only resources plus project or money giving is not solving problem, not necessarily have social impact, maybe sometimes not efficient. So in China, we can see this resources flow has some problem of facilitate or have some problem of make full use of the resources. That's why U-Change Foundation create a platform to help the effective giving. So the giving, the resources from government, business, academia, public media, and individual. So we made criterion to like these resources to go directly to the more efficient organization to choose the more efficient solution. So that's what we say social change, social impact. So we have made this chart to show this new philanthropy emphasized to create a social value. So this horizontal, vertical and horizontal show that the traditional one, the traditional charity and philanthropy and the new philanthropy had different social impact because China has a very short tradition, short period to have this, develop this philanthropy. So we need to do this advocate to let them know what's the social impact and not only give money simply. So that's why we make this. So that's means the social issues, and this means the total solution, whether it's it's a systematic solution we have. So with the public issues and the total solution, we can create more impact or more social value. So that's the progress we think in China we are leading, or we advocate at this different stage from 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0. We think that's the social innovation, and we hope we encourage social change maker. So, so from new philanthropy to new CSR, that's what I suggest, because this is a discussion about CSR. So solving social problem by social entrepreneurship. And the social problem was real social problem. How to define social problem? We have so many problems, environment problem and aging problem and so on, and poverty. But all of them relevant to these things. Equity, I mean equal access, and efficiency, I mean effective resources allocation, and sustainability. That is long-term solution without new problem creation. So we need to solve these three problems. And for these three problems, that is the social innovation, I think. So how to create real social value? I think CSR should also to choose the like this. This is three standards I already mentioned: aim, approach, and action, as criteria to find your cooperator, to design your project in China. I think that we suggest. So, to whom to collaborate with? That we discussed the what and the why and the how and now whom. And social innovation support platform, U-Change Foundation. And we have done much on social innovation R&D, piloting and funding and advocacy.
Ms. Wang, I'll actually ask you to pause there. I'd actually like to ask you a question, if I can. When you're talking about who to partner with, one of our companies asked, can you talk a little bit about the role of government? How important is it that the NGO a company partners with has a strong government relationship?
Yes, the government relationship is still very important, because we have still a lot of restriction to register the organization. But gradually, they will become easier. During the time, you need to find the better channel. The channel, I mean, also the partner, the local partner, who had a better relationship with government. So that's what I think is
okay.
important.
Actually, and I think that that's a really important question. I wonder if you can expand a little bit. If the company selects an organization to partner with that doesn't have a strong government relationship, will that affect their business?
Yeah.
Please expand. How so?
Yeah, because as a NGO, small NGO organization, they have, if they want to do something in the local community, they have to deal with the local government, and they have to get the help from the foundation. And the foundation, you know, most of the foundation, they can register. Most of them has some relationship with China, with the Chinese government. Of course, you can do with the grassroots organization, but normally they are very small and very few of talent workers and not very efficient. Yeah, sometimes that's the problem.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to think of. Carrie, do you have a follow-up?
I do. So, related to working with an organization that has a relationship with the government, and I understand being registered as a charity, but having an ongoing, whether it's management or implementation of their programs with the government, some of our companies are concerned about FCPA, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And what is your advice on how to manage that?
So the question is, it's not just about is the NGO registered, it's also about does the NGO have ongoing relationship with the government, correct?
Right, because, yes.
In the US, there's compliance issues related to whether the NGO has that relationship.
Yeah, not only register, but when you implement your project, you need to go into the community. So community access also had some government engaged in. So we need to allow us to do what we want to do. Normally, the Chinese government was happy to if you just give the resources and money, materials, especially during the disasters. So if you do some community development, you really need to find a local partner.
Dable, I wonder if you could tackle a couple of the questions we had that I think are sort of related to the current law. One was related to the funds, whether it's coming from headquarters or locally. And also, I think one thing I'd like to explore with both of you is these common U.S. practices in corporate giving programs and how you think they will play out in your market. So the one that comes to mind, which came up, is this non-cash concept. In-kind giving, product, pro bono. What is the current state of affairs, and how do you think it would be received currently?
Sure. So I think right now, and the law, like I said, has just been passed, and so it's really applicable for this fiscal year, ending March 31st, 2015. And so I think you are seeing international companies sort of plugging the gap, so to speak, in providing the funds. But then again, in the annual report, they will say that while we didn't give X amount directly, i.e. the local company didn't, we were able to bring X, Y amount from the headquarters. But I think in the long run, the local entity is the one who needs to actually be showing that these funds have gone from their books. Now, I think many of the companies here, for example, I'm sure may be doing much more than the 2%. I mean, earlier today I was speaking to an organization, to a company, and they were saying for tax purposes, they don't necessarily have that much profits on their books in India. That being said, at a global level, they are very, very profitable, and therefore the global level comes in and provides this kind of support. So I'm sure that will happen. The law right now is just how much the legal entity in that country actually makes. You also in India have, for example, in banking, due to regulations, many times the bank will have 5 or 6 different entities, legal entities that they've had to set up. And so within that, there is the benefit or the potential of pooling that capital together amongst the 5 or 6 entities. But let's say 3 entities were profitable and 3 were not. You can't actually have a cumulative number where you can offset losses from one company to the next. So it has to be, the profit of each individual company, but the funds then can be actually sort of disseminated to one organization, and the pooling of capital is allowed from that perspective. In terms of non-cash, in India currently at least, the law does not allow tax deductions for in-kind donations. And so if you're giving computers or hardware or software, et cetera, there is actually no tax deduction that you can get from that. And so that's probably one of the reasons why in India you do not have as much in-kind donation as you have, for example, here in the US. That being said, we are seeing sort of a pickup of companies sort of offering their products or services at a lower cost basis. realizing that the price to pay for certain markets is much lower than typically you find in urban India. And you're slowly seeing now companies trying to figure out how they can harness their professional skills and bring that to the table. So Dasra has been working with Vodafone, for example, for a number of years now, enabling them to execute a World of Difference program where they give their staff 2 months paid leave to bring their professional skills to these nonprofit organizations. And so you're seeing slowly sort of that happening. But again, the law is not clear on how you can monetize that in terms of the 2% yet.
Yeah, I think one thing that impressed me while I was there learning from companies is that there really is a very strong volunteering movement and pro bono movement beginning, and that it is developing. And I think as the implementation goes forward with the law, companies will lead in how they determine the valuation and what will count towards that 2%. So I think there's some possibilities and some opportunities there, although obviously the tax implications all sort of run in the background. Ms. Wang, I'd love to know, similarly in China, do companies often also include product donation, in-kind donation, and are NGOs interested in having that type of donation? Probably disasters, but even beyond that.
Yeah, they like donations. Like, they simply give money. They are more happy. But I think that the more and more organizations, they need a more pro bono, like capacity building, and give some seeds fund to incubate social enterprise, and to help them to learn some how to do business, because social business, the NGOs, they do not know how to do it. So a lot of work, a lot of topics, they need to be helped by pro bono volunteers. Yeah.
I think that's a great point, because I think corporate funders have the role of providing the funding for the programs they support and the cause areas they support, but as you speak about pro bono, it's also about developing the NGO sector, allowing them to build their capacity and expand their work. So that's a great point. I know another really common question that we hear is, at headquarters, a company may have identified a short list of very important cause areas. I would select the example of STEM education, because it's such an important issue right now for so many companies. That's science, technology, engineering, and math education. And companies are investing very heavily in that. So when they come to a new market like China or India, how do they adjust? How do they take maybe a cause area that they have invested in heavily and consider how that should play out in a new country like India or China? Devil, you want to take that first?
Sure. So I think one of the things one, of course, has to look at is the cultural context. And so in India, for example, the number one reason why girls drop out of school is lack of toilets. And so you have a large percentage of girls dropping out, usually in 6th or 7th grade, because there are no toilets once they reach puberty. And so while STEM, of course, is extremely important, and continuing education is extremely important, many times people and companies don't realize, sitting here or outside of India, that there actually are other issues that perhaps need to be looked at. And if you have, X percentage of your population that's actually dropping out of school, then the quality of education in 10th grade, when only a small percentage is even able to attend 10th grade, there's an issue. And so I think many times companies have to sort of rethink and perhaps go earlier down the value chain, so to speak, and figure out what are some of these root causes. And I think that's at times difficult when decisions are, for example, being made here on college scholarships, and of course that's very important. But again, in India, I think it's 1 out of every 100 girls actually are able to attend school up to college. And so there are other underlying issues that probably need to be looked at. Toilets in general. And we have more cell phone penetration in India than toilet penetration. And I think, again, close to 60% of our population do not even have access to toilets. And while that may seem something that why would a corporate care about, there's, of course, the dignity element, but again, it affects schools, it affects women, because typically they actually cannot use the restroom post 4 in the morning. So the health issues that then emerge, the sexual harassment that emerges as they defecate in public, and there's a whole host of issues, again, that are particular to India. Another topic we've been speaking quite a bit about, and I think at a global level, child marriage. And when children get married and mothers or girls actually at the age of 12, 13, and 14 are having babies, they put their life at risk. And we have 56,000 women who die every single year in India during childbirth. Majority of them are adolescent girls. And the flip side of that, or sort of, is that the children, we have 1,600 children dying every single day in India under the age of 5, again, because of a lack of sanitary conditions as well as the health of their mother. And so what could be issues here in the US, such as STEM, which is extremely important, there could be other issues in India that you may want to start looking at solving. And it's, I think, important for philanthropy, whether it's from a corporate or a high net worth individual, or even governments for that matter, to sort of go into those directions as well.
Before I respond, I'd like to allow you, Ms. Wang, to...
Yeah, I think China's problems are not as same as India, and I think China the most important issue is to lack of innovation. It's a like drive, because we have a lot of economic infrastructure, but the lack of social infrastructure. So that's why I support you to give the donation and to give support to this area you mentioned. So I think that's the fundamental. Not only give money on poverty alleviation or disaster alleviation. That's my opinion.
Okay. So I think if I were to translate both of those responses, it may be that the long-term objective of certain focus areas is maintained, but dialing it back in a local context, like our most important pressing need are root causes related to whatever the focus area might be. So the strategy is long-term. It can maintain the perhaps corporate, strategies and focus areas, but understanding the local context is very important. So we'd like to give the tables time to talk, but before we do, I'd like to ask if you can share your opinion or something a little bit more hot button, but what would you say is maybe the biggest pitfall you've seen of Western funders? It can be your opinion or an example of entering the Indian or the Chinese market. We'll keep going in our same
Sure,
order.
sure. No, yeah. So I think you hit it, with the last question. I think, again, understanding the culture context is critical. I think also picking local players is really important. And so many times organizations try to sort of, start and own and operate their models from day one, not realizing that typically it takes 5 to 7 years to create behavioral change. And then actually have these individuals access the services or products that you're trying to deliver. So I think funding these local players, focusing on capacity building support, I think is really critical, because you need to build institutions in these countries. And I think the long-term perspective that many of you guys have in your business world, if you can bring that to the nonprofit world, ideally that enables these organizations to really grow and scale versus each year look for additional funds, because it's sort of short-term commitments that are project-based versus institutional focused.
I think most of the multinational corporation CSR in China is good. What they lack of, normally they lack of channels. They choose the partners with only what they, the old face. I think the Gango or famous actor or something like that. So I suggest you do some research on the partners to choose them to cooperate. And a good example, Tom's, they donate 400,000 pairs of shoes every year in China, cooperate with us. But this is a very traditional donation, no creation. But because of the cooperate with us, we have a volunteer station. We recruit a lot of volunteers, to a big amount of people to join it, to participate. And we developed this program into community development and make it a long-term project. So that's what I think, to choose the best partner, to have the channel to go to the community side. That's what I suggest.
Okay. I think you're both talking a lot about kind of connecting with local partners. Last year at the summit, we talked a lot about structure and process for international giving in a session. We found that most companies are still heavily reliant on what we might call intermediaries or pass-through organizations or NGOs with an international footprint. And I think the reason that is because there's potential risk to making some local partnerships. One thing we're doing is sessions like this to learn more. We've also got a handout that we can give to everyone as they leave with some local resources to try to help break down some of those barriers of finding local partners, because sometimes that can be the biggest challenge. But thank you both for being here and already